welcome to or welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about Colleen Hoover. 2 years ago in October 2020, I read my very first Colleen Hoover book. I read It Ends With Us, and now 2 years later I have read all of her books and I just finished It Starts With Us today. This is her most recent release, and I thought what better time than now to do a complete ranking of all the Colleen Hoover books that I've read. Obviously everyone has different opinions, everyone has different things that they like in different books, so this is just my ranking of all my Colleen Hoover books. Also, if you want to follow me on Goodreads, I will have my account linked down below. That is where I update what I'm currently reading, what I have already read, and my ratings for everything. I also have a little breakdown of what 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars means to me. And now let's just get started with ranking Colleen Hoover's books. I'm first going to start with the It Ends With Us series because this was the first book I read and the most recent book I read, and this is my favorite book of all. This gets the #1 spot. It Ends With Us is what got me back into reading, what made me fall in love with Colleen Hoover. Whenever I've recommended Colleen Hoover to my friends, I always tell them to start with this one. It is so good. It Ends With Us tells the story of Lily, the main character, and she meets a guy named Ryle. And after like a few months, they start a relationship. They fall deeply in love. On the side, Lily finds these journals that she wrote when she was a teenager about her teenage love with a boy named Atlas. So we're kind of going in like dual timelines, but it doesn't switch every chapter. There's just like sometimes there'll pop in like a journal entry from Lily when she was a teenager talking about Atlas. Meanwhile, in the present, she has this like amazing relationship with Ryle, but then Lily meets Atlas in her adult life. They haven't seen each other for like 10 years, and then stuff goes down. This book is so good. I love this universe. I love these characters. Like, Lily is such a good main character. Like, sometimes main characters can be annoying. I loved Lily. I love her best friend, and the thing that got me so hooked on this book and so hooked on Colleen Hoover's writing style in general is that she uses so many plot lines. Like, I thought the book was finished like right here, but no, there's plot twist after plot twist. And I don't mean like plot twist, someone comes back from the dead. I'm talking about a change in the plot where the plot is going in one direction and then it twists and it goes in another direction and you're not expecting it. Maybe you are expecting it because everyone talks about how Colleen Hoover uses plot twists in her writing, but I read this book blindly and I was not expecting it to go in the direction that it went. So yeah, this book is just like so good. The plot is so good, the characters are so good. #1 favorite. And then we have It Starts With Us. This is the sequel to It Ends With Us. It picks up right where the first book left off, and it is so good. I am so happy that Colleen Hoover wrote this sequel. This book made me realize how much I love the It Ends With Us universe. Like, I could read about these characters for like 5 more books. The chapters alternate between Lily's perspective and Atlas's perspective, and we get to learn a lot more about Atlas's past. At the end of It Ends With Us, you kind of like think, okay, like everything's perfect now, but then when you start to read It Starts With Us, like you realize how at the end of It Ends With Us, it couldn't just snap and be perfect. We needed to go through this whole book to get to the perfect ending. I would say the first third is kind of just a continuation of It Ends With Us, and then at the 2/3 mark, that's when new plot points came in and I got super interested. I could not put it down after that moment. So I loved It Starts With Us. I gave it 5 stars as well, and I'm ranking it #6. Next up, we have another one of Colleen Hoover's most popular books. This is Verity. You will never be the same once you read Verity. It is insane. All of Colleen Hoover's books are romance books, and then this one is a psychological thriller. I read it in less than 24 hours. I could not put it down. And like, once you finish reading, you don't even know what you just read. You don't know what to believe. Team manuscript, by the way. So Verity is about a writer named Lowen, and she gets hired to ghostwrite the end of another author, Verity's book series, because Verity gets into an accident and is unable to continue writing. So Lowen has to move into Verity's house to have access to all of her drafts and notes. However, things start happening in the house that are a little creepy, and while Lowen is looking through all of Verity's drafts, she finds an autobiography that Verity wrote that was never meant for anyone to find or read. And Lowen starts reading it, and we get a couple chapters of Verity's autobiography. We find out what happened in Verity's past. We find out what happened to Verity's Two Dead Daughters. It's an adventure. I rank Verity number 8. Like, it is so good, but it's scared me a little. If I didn't scare so easily, like, this would be in my top 3. You just gotta read it. You have to be in on this experience. Now we have November 9. This is the second Colleen Hoover book that I ever read in November of 2020. Perfect timing. This one is very similar to It Ends With Us in that it's a romance. It has a very good plot line, and I also find that Colleen Hoover's plot lines are very original. Like, it's not just like boy meets girl, issue, resolution. Like, no, there's other stuff tied in, and insane plot twist. November 9 is about Fallon and Ben, who meet one day in Los Angeles, and they kind of have like an instant connection, but it's not like instant love, you know what I mean? Like, it's a little more realistic. The only issue is that Fallon is moving to New York the next day. So they met on November 9th, and they make a pact that for the next 5 years, they will only meet each other one day of the year on November 9th, and they will not keep in contact for the rest of the year. So they block each other on social media, they don't have each other's phone numbers, and we follow them throughout the next 5 years. The first 2 years are kind of like average, like they just like meet up, get to know each other. I wasn't like super hooked at the beginning, but then starting on the 3rd November 9, things start happening and it gets so good. And then the 4th November 9, 5th, was I about to say 6? You have to read to see for yourself. So I rank this one number 3. So next we have Ugly Love. This one is definitely way up there, very popular. Ugly Love tells the story of Tate and Miles, and it's told in alternating chapters between the past and the present. So in the present, we get to know about Tate and Miles' relationship from Tate's perspective, and then in the past, 6 years before, we get to know about Miles' past from Miles' perspective, because in the present, Tate and Miles have this really nice connection, but Miles has a dark past, dark secret that he will not tell Tate, and it stops him from having a real relationship with her, from being serious with her. And so I was like on the edge of my seat, couldn't wait to read all the past chapters to find out what had happened to Miles. And honestly, I had a few guesses, but I will say that Ugly Love is the craziest plot twist out of any of Colleen Hoover's books. Like, I don't know if anyone could have ever guessed what happened, because it's very insane and very traumatic. I feel like I kind of liked the past chapters a little bit more because I knew that there was something about to happen. It made me very excited to read them. So that's why I give Ugly Love a 7. It was so good, so well written. Again, a very original story, but I feel like the Tate and Miles chapters like could have had more to them. Next we have Reminders of Him, which is Colleen Hoover's second most recent book. So before It Starts With Us, and it did not disappoint. This one was so good. It's about a mother and her daughter, and I'm a sucker for family stories, so I loved that. After being in prison for the last 5 years for a mistake that she made, Kenna is finally released from prison, and she decides to head back to the town where her daughter lives, the daughter that she gave birth to in prison. However, she does not have legal custody of her daughter because she was in prison, and her daughter is now living with a family who wants nothing to do with her. You kind of understand who these people are who have her daughter once you read the book. I don't want to really give anything away, but when Kenna arrives in the town, she quickly realizes that she's not wanted and that those people are not going to let her see her daughter, talk to her daughter, have a relationship with her daughter, and she ends up forming a bond with a guy that she meets in the town, and it turns out that he might be the key to her finally reuniting with her daughter. I don't know if I explained that really well, but this is a very emotional, complex story, and it was so good, and I rank it number 5. Next we have Heartbones. This is the 3rd Colleen Hoover book that I ever read, and it was so good. It Ends With Us, November 9. Heartbones, amazing trio to start with. Heartbones is about Bea and Samson, and unlike most of the other characters in Colleen Hoover's books who are adults, like mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, Bea and Samson have just graduated high school, so they're much younger. It's the summer between high school and college, and Bea decides to go live with her dad for the summer. He lives like kind of on a beach house, I guess, kind of giving me like Outer Banks vibes. And in this like beach town, she meets Samson, and the two of them bond over their very traumatic pasts. and they agree to have this summer relationship. But obviously they fall very madly in love with each other. And then obviously we have a major plot twist at the end that kind of destroys everything that we know about these two characters. I loved it. This one is number 4. Next, I'm going to go over Colleen Hoover's series. So the first series I have here is the Maybe Someday series. It contains Maybe Someday, Maybe Not, and Maybe Now. Maybe Someday tells the story of Sydney and Ridge, who first meet because they live in the same apartment complex and their apartment balconies look out at each other. And Ridge goes onto his balcony a lot to play his guitar because he's a musician, and Sydney goes out onto her balcony to listen to him. Then I think after like only 2 weeks of kind of making eye contact with each other, Sydney finds out that her boyfriend is cheating on her with her roommate, and she moves out immediately. And through a turn of events, Sydney ends up getting the extra room in Ridge's apartment. His apartment has 4 bedrooms and she gets the 4th one. And then, you know, they start to get to know each other. It turns out that Ridge is deaf, and so him and Sydney develop like this communication through text, expressions, through like the vibrations of his music, because Ridge is a musician. He plays the guitar and writes like music notes, but he struggles with lyrics. He has writer's block. And Sydney is studying music and she loves writing lyrics, so they kind of become a team for this band that Ridge like makes music for, and that's like something that brings them very close together. However, Ridge has a girlfriend, so yeah, it gets complicated, but this book is really cool. I think the only thing that I didn't love so much about it is that so much of their conversation was through text, and it's just a little annoying, you know, sometimes to like read a book that's through text. But the story was still really good, and something that's really cool is every single song that Sydney and Ridge write together, you can actually listen to it on iTunes, because Colleen Hoover teamed up with a actual singer who turned all of those songs into actual music. I gave it 4 stars and I rank it number 13. Next we have Maybe Not, which is the novella. So as I said, Sydney and Ridge live in a 4-person apartment, so Maybe Not is about the other 2 roommates, Warren and Bridget, who also kind of have a relationship, but it's not like the main focus of Maybe Someday, obviously, because Maybe Someday is about Sydney and Ridge. So Maybe Not tells the story of how Warren and Bridget came to be. There are some scenes from Maybe Someday told from Warren's perspective, and he's like a very funny guy. He's Ridge's best friend. And then we also get to know more about Bridget. She kind of like has a cold front throughout Maybe Someday, but here we get to know more about her past and like dive deeper into their relationship. Although this book was good, and although we get to know a little bit more about Warren and Bridget and their characters and their past, there wasn't like so much substance to it. So I only gave this book 3 stars and I rank it number 18. Then the last book in the series is Maybe Now. You could totally read Maybe Someday and not read the other books, but obviously I wanted to see what else happens with these characters. I don't know if I said this, but Maybe Someday alternates chapters between Sydney's perspective and Ridge's perspective. So this one does the same, and a 3rd perspective, but I'm not going to say who because it kind of spoils the first book a little bit and it kind of spoils this book. It's kind of the same concept of like It Starts With Us, where It Ends With Us was fine on its own and you think that everything just works out perfectly at the end of It Ends With Us, and then she created It Starts With Us and you realize no, like we needed a whole book to get to the actual happy ending. That's kind of the vibes that Maybe Now gives me. Like you think everything works out perfectly by the end of Maybe Someday, but then when you read Maybe Now you realize, okay, no, we needed all of this to actually get a happy ending for all of the characters. So this was really good. I gave Maybe Now 4 stars and I ranked it number 16. Now we have the Hopeless series, and I feel like this is the most complicated series that Colleen Hoover tries to explain. We have Hopeless. This is the first book in the series. You can read this alone and not read anything afterwards if you want to. The sequel to Hopeless is Losing Hope, and the novella after Losing Hope is Finding Cinderella. However, we have another novella after Finding Cinderella called Finding Perfect, which still includes characters from the Hopeless trilogy. However, Finding Perfect also includes characters from All Your Perfects. So you could read these 3 books alone. You could read this book alone. You could read this book alone, but you can't read this book unless you've read all the other ones. So starting with Hopeless, the main character in Hopeless is a girl named Sky. Sky is just starting high school. She's in like grade 11, I think, so like junior year, I think, and she's never really met any kids in her town other than her next door neighbor, who's her best friend, but her best friend is conveniently on exchange this year. So Sky enters high school alone, and once she does, she meets a guy named Holder, and her and Holder kind of have like this instant connection. They bond over running every morning, and they find out that they live very close to each other, so then they start going on runs together in the morning. But something fishy is kind of going on because Holder thinks that he knows Sky, and she reminds him of someone person that he knew in his past. So Sky and Holder obviously end up developing a relationship. Then there is this big secret that gets revealed and everything changes. Everything that they thought they knew changes. Like, it is insane. I did guess this, like this plot twist I kind of knew from the beginning, but it doesn't change how insane it is. And this book is also very heavy. Probably one of her most heavy books that she's ever written. There is so much in this book that like you couldn't even guess all the topics that get covered in this book because you can't even imagine any of them. There's a lot of trauma in this. I would suggest looking up trigger warnings, but other than that, it was a very good story. I did really like it. It was very interesting, very different. When things start to go downhill, it is just like insane, and I didn't want to put the book down. I gave Hopeless 4 stars and I rank it number 12. Next in the series, we have Losing Hope. So this is the same story as Hopeless, told from Holder's perspective this time, but we do get additional scenes in this book. So like moments between Sky and Holder that Sky doesn't mention in her perspective. And also when like Holder is having all these weird thoughts about like where he met Sky before, we obviously get to see that unfold from Holder's perspective. And I think there's like this much at the end that is new information. Like Hopeless ends like here, and then we get this much of new material from Losing Hope. Do I think this book was necessary? No. But do I think it's very interesting and I'm happy I read it? Yes. So I gave Losing Hope 4 stars as well, and I ranked this number 15. Next we have Finding Cinderella, and it tells the story of Sky's best friend and Holder's best friend because they end up forming a relationship. They do have a really good connection and they might have a past. So Finding Cinderella kind of goes off this tiny detail that Holder's best friend mentioned in Losing Hope only. But yeah, Finding Cinderella was good. But as I said, Sky's best friend is on exchange during Sky's book, so we don't really know much about her, and we don't really know much about Holder's best friend either. So I kind of found it just like a little bit random and not like the most interesting to read a story about them because I don't really care about them. Like, I care more about Sky and Holder. There was a plot twist, but it wasn't like super insane because it's such a short book and it's not really about characters that you get to know very, very well. So I gave this 3 stars and I rank it number 19. So last, even though it's last, I didn't hate it. I still liked it. It just, you know. Next up we have All Your Perfects, which can be read alone. It can be read without the other books. You can also read this one first and then read the Hopeless series and then read this one. All Your Perfects tells the story of Quinn and Graham, who are in a relationship together, and it alternates between the past and the present. The past tells how Quinn and Graham met and how they formed their relationship and how they fell in love and all of that beginning stuff. And then the present tense tells the story of Quinn and Graham's relationship. In the present tense, they're married. It's also not a spoiler that they're having marriage problems. And I found personally, this wasn't one of my favorite books. I felt like I just didn't care to read the past chapters of how Quinn and Graham met and fell in love, because then I was switching to chapters where they were like fighting with each other and didn't really feel like they were in love in the present tense. And so I was like, why am I wasting my time reading how they were 7 years ago if I know that now in the present they're fighting? So yeah, this one was a little bit disappointing because it's also one of her most popular books and I just like didn't really like it. And this is number 17, so the lowest actual novel by Colleen Hoover. Sorry. But then we have Finding Perfect. So this is another novella. This is her shortest novella. Finding Perfect combines characters from the All Your Perfects universe and the Hopeless universe. And what's interesting is I gave the Hopeless series 4 stars, 4 stars, and then 3 stars. And I gave All Your Perfects 3 stars. Finding Perfect gets 5 out of 5 stars. This one made all the other books worth it. This book was so good. I like really can't tell you what it's about because it spoils all the other books, but it just wraps up these 2 universes so well. It wraps up the stories in this little nice red ribbon. This book is the best novella she's written. I rank this one number 10. Next up is Confess. This is another one of the very first books that I read by Colleen Hoover, like maybe number 4 or 5. It was very good, very original storyline again. However, as I said, like the first 3 books that I read by Colleen Hoover, It Ends With Us, November 9, and Heartbones, all had insane plot twists, and Confess had no plot twist. So I was like a little bit disappointed by this book because at that point, like I was loving Colleen Hoover's writing for her insane plot twists, but it still had a really good storyline and still had really good characters, so I still really enjoyed it. Confess tells the story of Auburn and Owen, who meet each other and form a relationship, obviously, but there are many complications in their relationship, and something that Colleen Hoover does a lot is that the relationships and like the storyline of the book doesn't happen over like 1 month. Like sometimes it'll happen over multiple months, even a few years. So it's a little bit more realistic in that sense. So Auburn and Owen definitely have a longer relationship because they have to work through a lot of complications in forms that I don't really want to spoil. And something that's interesting is that Owen is an artist, and throughout the book you read descriptions of the paintings that he's made, and in the middle of the book she has attached some of the paintings that he's made, and he attaches a secret to each painting. So he asks people to submit secrets to his art studio on like anonymous pieces of paper, and then he draws paintings based on those secrets. I gave this one 4 stars and I rank it number 11. Next up is Without Merit. This is not one of Colleen Hoover's most popular books, but I definitely enjoyed it. Without Merit tells a story about a teenage girl named Merit, and she lives in a pretty crazy family. She has a lot of siblings. She has like weird parents. There's weird stuff going on. She has a weird relationship with her twin sister. It's just a weird family dynamic, and then like someone gets added into the family by her twin sister. I don't really know how to describe this book because it's mainly a book about growing up and finding who you are and like all those teenage insecurities. It's less of a romance book and more of a coming of age book. I feel like I'm advertising this really badly because like who wants to read a book about like a depressed teenager and like no romance? There's a little bit of romance. It's just really interesting, and I'm a sucker for family stories again. So I give this one 5 stars and I rank it number 9. Now let's talk about Layla. This one is a supernatural fiction. I was really scared reading it, but nothing ends up happening. Not in like a bad way where it's boring, but like in a relieving way where I was like, okay, like it doesn't get too scary. So Layla tells a story of Leeds and Layla. They are in a relationship, and it's told from Leeds' perspective actually, and they meet one day at a wedding and they have an instant connection. They bond over a couple things that they have in common, and they develop a relationship. Like they bring it back to the city after the wedding. Then there's a huge accident and something happens to Layla, and in order to kind of fix their relationship, Leeds brings Layla back to that inn where they first met. However, the inn is like going out of business, and so the owner like lets them have the entire inn to themselves. He's not there, so they get like a week at this inn, and Leeds is trying to rebuild their relationship and fall in love with Layla. However, Leeds meets someone named Willow, and he ends up enjoying being in Willow's presence more than Layla's. And there's a plot twist, a huge plot twist, and I wish I could say it because it makes this book so much better than I'm explaining it. So I did give this 4 stars and I rank it number 14. But just like Verity, I feel like if you're not scared of the supernatural stuff, this would be like even higher on your ranking. Okay, now it's time to talk about the very last Colleen Hoover book that I have here, which also happens to be my number 2 favorite, Regretting You. This is definitely not up there on Colleen Hoover's most popular books. This is not her best book ever, but it hit different for me because it is a family story through and through, and as I've said, I just love family stories. So family story tied in with Colleen Hoover's writing and plot twists. Mwah, chef's kiss, amazing. Number 2 spot, 5 stars. Let me talk about this book. Regretting You tells the story of Morgan and her daughter Clara. Morgan had Clara when she was very young as well. It was a teenage pregnancy. I don't remember how old Morgan was when she had Clara, but in the present tense when the book takes place, Clara is 16 years old, and the book alternates chapters between Morgan and Clara, so you get both of their perspectives. There was a classic Colleen Hoover plot twist, but the plot twist happens in chapter 5. Everything just gets crazy from there on. We deal with Morgan dealing with this huge plot twist that happens in chapter 5, plus someone else in her life that I can't really say anything because then it spoils everything after chapter 5. And then Clara is dealing with this huge thing that happens in chapter 5, and she's developing a new relationship with her high school boyfriend. I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining it because I'm at the end of the video and I've talked for so long and there's like 19 books in my head at this point, but Regretting You is so good. 5 stars, number 2. I loved Regretting You. You just have to read it. That is my complete Colleen Hoover book ranking. I love Colleen Hoover. I love all of her books. She is what got me back into reading after years of not reading. If you were looking for which Colleen Hoover book to start with or which Colleen Hoover book to read next, or maybe you've read all the Colleen Hoover books and you're just interested in my opinion, whatever your reason was for watching until the end of this video, I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below because I respond to every single comment, and of course subscribe to my channel if you're not already, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!